Skill! Into the middle of the storm! Lewis floats it up there. Off the post. That's a goal for the U.S. Reyna slides through. Beasley shot. Goal! Beasley! He's called it. The USA has qualified for Germany. Back post area, Donovan. Right across. Knocked in. USA has scored. Michael Bradley. He tags it. Michael Bradley's got two.
Eddie Johnson gets there and scores for the USA. Oh, played it to there and Landon Donovan makes it two. It's that scoreline again. Lightning doesn't strike twice in Columbus, Ohio. It struck 4 times. He stops at Cero again.
La firmó, le dije fírmala, la firmó Gio, qué gol.
Gane quien gane partido Niño caliente.
Welcome to another edition of the Mexican Soccer Show. Monday Night Football. A special edition of the Mexican Soccer Show with a great game that's coming up. Mexico versus the U.S. on Friday. Let's go ahead and get started. Good evening. Welcome to an edition of the Mexican Soccer Show. I'm your host, Luis Vasquez from FootMex Nation. Another edition of FootMex Nation's amazing Monday Night Football. I love to say that all the time. All right, it's going to be a great show, especially with the game that's coming up on Friday. Mexico versus U.S. 2-0. El fútbol es nuestro. The rivalry has already started from the U.S. a couple of weeks ago. Mexico finally coming in and tweeting on their own, already heating up. Fans are ready. The stadium is ready from what I can see. And, of course, we have a great discussion, great panel for you guys, a great show today with great casts. We'll start with Mr. Mexico World Cup, Mr. Tom Marshall. You might not recognize him. All clean cut. It's supposed to be No Shave November, but for the Mexican Soccer Show, we do the opposite here. Mr. Tom, who is right now the first journalist. I won't say the first, but I guess there's nobody there. He gets there early in Columbus, Ohio. Mr. Tom, as you can see, in a hotel room, ready to go for us late there. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I thought I'd be like here nice and early, but it's like all the Mexican journalists are already here. Like they all got here yesterday.
Everyone wants to get acclimated to the weather, and it's usually some craziness. But Tom's already all there. We go with Mr. You might not recognize him, but this is Naib's kid, Naib Moran. Also shaved during this November, just boycotting the whole No Shave November. Just kidding, Mr. Naib, who's normally in Mexico City, but he's actually in Houston because this guy cares and he's voting. He flew all the way to Houston just to vote. Right, Naib? That's the reason why you're there.
Yeah, no. That's it. We saw Buenas noches. We saw Tom, Yves, and Cesar. It's an important week, so I mean, I think all the expectation is building up quite nicely, and after that 2015 CONCACAF Cup final, of course, this Hex beginning is something that we look forward to,
Definitely. Great start, Naive. We'll go Mr. Cesar Hernandez, who's in San Diego, also Tijuana. We'll say both because he goes to all the games there too. Cesar, how's it going? You ready for more days? I know you and I are always the nervous bunch of the bunch. How's it going?
Oh yeah, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little anxious here at Casa de Cesar. Where I'll be live tweeting the game. I'm not gonna be in Columbus, but I'll be in San Diego, bothering all you guys on Twitter. But yeah, man, I'm not gonna lie. I feel a little anxious. I feel a little apprehensive, but don't we all? Before that match against the United States in Columbus at Mat Free Stadium. So yeah, let's. I'm excited to talk about the match. Nonetheless, though, I'm looking forward to this.
All right, good. And our special guest for tonight, we wanted to have a fair show. We can just come in, the Mexican soccer show, bash the U.S., we're going to win, but it's a fair. We always invite to our guest that knows probably a leading, journalist in all things United States, have been covering them for many, many years. I know I used to read all his stuff back in the early 2000s to see the rivalry. Well, no one was talking and tweeting about Mexico. Actually, there's no Twitter, or the U.S. There was Mr. Ives Galarcep. Ives from Soccer by Ives, also gold.com. How's it going, sir? Thank you for joining us tonight in this edition of Monday Night Football.
Thanks for having me, guys. It should be a great week. We have to call this. Let's face it. This is the super. If it's not American football, but this is our Super Bowl, right? I mean, World Cup aside, USA Mexico is as big as it gets, and it's if you can't get up for this one, you're in the wrong business. And I know I'm the old man of the bunch here, and it's funny enough. This is actually my 20th USA Mexico match that I will be covering, and it's crazy how time has flown by, and it never gets boring, and I feel that this one has a different kind of a feeling around it, and I can't wait to get to Columbus.
Oh, there you go. Ives, really quick, what was the first match you covered?
First USA Mexico match was actually in 2000, and it was at Giant Stadium, and it was a Mexico C team. It was made up of players from 3 Liga MX teams. If that was even what it was called back then, but it wasn't a full Mexican team, but they put a Mexican team together, played the U.S. The U.S. won, actually. 3-0, I think, was the score. And at that time, I didn't know what I was getting into in terms of the rivalry, but the next one after that was slightly different because I was in Korea for the World Cup game in 2002, and needless to say, it was a little bit different, the stakes, atmosphere, and I learned that day what the rivalry was about and what it could be. And it's really kind of blossomed into everything you could dream of.
Well, definitely. Was that a U.S. Cup?
The one in 2000?
The one in 2000 or 2001? I think that it was.
It was 2000. Well, the game in 2000. I don't know if it was an official any kind of company. It might have been. It might have been some tournament Mexico was forced to play in, and they sent a C team. Well, but yeah, so
there you go. That's you get 2 mentions of the 2002 World Cup Korea match during this whole podcast. So that's one. And
I thought that World Cup never existed. Actually, I thought that's just something that
existed until the quinto partido.
Yeah, there
before that. All right, guys. Well, obviously, there's many of you that are on the chat that join us live that like to listen to us and talk. Amongst yourself, everyone's already on the chat saying hello to Mr. John Cervantes. Pancho Villa's Army is obviously there. Giovanna Sanchez, the guy with name 23, Norca Ativa. So if you're not on right now, if you're driving, hurry up and get home, get on your desktop or on your iPad and get with the chat and ask us your question. Mr. Cesar Hernandez, he doesn't know this, I didn't tell him, but he's going to be looking at the chat, highlighting some questions on there. And
all right.
He'll be looking at it and moderating it, obviously making sure that everything is okay there and giving us some quick updates on what people are saying. So Cesar, that is your task tonight.
As long as you pay me $20 per question.
Done.
That's my going rate. So I think I'll be all right with that.
We'll be good. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Mexico-U.S., as you know, very, very important match. For those of you, if you're joining us for the first time, this is going to be a huge, huge game, especially since it's the first of the hexagonal play in the last World qualifying round where Mexico has gotten 0-0, no positive. I can't even think of something positive in the last, 4 meetings between Mexico and the U.S. It's the Columbus, Mat Free Stadium where all of Mexico kind of just crumbles and everything's going around. And this is finally a game where it's finally here right before this World Cup that's coming up into the next step. So what better way than to have, like I said, a great panel and obviously Ives also. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. Let's obviously the Mexican Soccer Show talked a little bit about the call-ups, which bringing in, the whole arsenal. A lot of people were saying bringing a lot of players from obviously from Europe and the best of the best. No one really complaining a lot on what Mexico called. But since we have Mr. Ives here, Jurgen Klinsmann also released his lineup and not lineup, his call-up. Mr. Ives, what can you tell us about that lineup? I mean, we've seen some players in Mexico. Mr. William Yarrow is there, which I didn't think he would get a call-up. But as overall, on your, obviously on the fans and the U.S. fans, how are you seeing this call-up? Does it match up against Mexico's, bringing it all together type of call-up?
Well, in terms of talent, I mean, it's hard to argue that Mexico has the more talented roster when you look at the players that they have coming in from Europe and in the form that a lot of those guys are in. But what's funny is in this rivalry, it seems like none of that matters. I mean, there's definitely been games in the past where Mexico had clearly the better roster, clearly the stronger team, and they should beat the U.S. and it never works out that way. I think it's a little different this time. This U.S. team is actually in pretty good shape. There's no Clint Dempsey, which obviously hurts. He's been out for a few months now. No Jeff Cameron, which is a huge blow for them. So I think they're a little vulnerable. But having said that, they're in Columbus, a place they know well, and I think they still have. That's gonna suit them well. But if there's a year that I'm feeling like this could be the year that Mexico breaks that string, I think this could definitely be the year.
Interesting. You say that. What's the biggest news out of that call-up, though? I mean, you mentioned, is it Jeff Cameron? You mentioned a little bit about Clint, but obviously people knew that Clint wasn't there. Are any of the fans going, oh, we should have called this guy, or why did he call this guy? I mean, I saw Julian Green there. What's the biggest? Is there any controversies or anything, or everything is just kind of staying legit?
Well, I don't think there's anything too crazy. I mean, I think the one player that a few people hate to see out of the mix is Darlington Nagbe of the Portland Timbers. But as U.S. fans know, is pretty well documented, he kind of passed up a call-up in October. And I think once he did that, it was kind of setting the stage for him to be out of the mix. And let's face it, he hasn't had the greatest year. As good as he looked last year, he didn't follow that up this year. And there was a lot. He showed a lot of promise last year. And if you'd have asked me a year ago, where would Darlington Nagbe be? I would have had Darlington Nagbe in the starting lineup right now, but it hasn't worked out that way. But other than that, though, really, it's pretty straightforward. I think what's appealing to a lot of U.S. fans is the number of young players that have come in. Lyndon Gooch is a real exciting young player over at Sunderland, and he showed quite a bit in the October friendlies. He's a guy who, if you want to talk about someone who could be a surprise, a bit of an X factor, if you will, he could be a kid who comes off the bench and shocks some people. He's fearless. He likes to go at people, and I don't think he's going to be, if he gets that chance, I don't think he'll be intimidated by the moment.
Wait, so if you don't mind me asking him a question, like Ives, with considering Jeff Cameron's injury, what do you think is the likelihood of Omar Gonzalez starting in defense for the U.S. men's national team?
I think it's a very good chance. I think the fact that it's been a roller coaster year for Omar Gonzalez, because at the beginning of the year, he had a really rough outing down in Guatemala, and the 6 months before that, in the lead up to that, he had shaky moments here and there where he really kind of started to lose some ground. And after that Guatemala game, Jurgen Klinsmann wanted no part of Omar Gonzalez, and he fell completely down the pecking order. But credit to Omar Gonzalez, he's fought his way all the way back. Obviously, he did really well for Pachuca, won a title there, and now he has this opportunity. I think he will start. I think if you're Jurgen Klinsmann, it's either him or Steve Birnbaum. And as much as Birnbaum has done well with all of his opportunities, I think Omar Gonzalez, with the experience that he has, the knowledge that he has of this Mexican team, he's played against a lot of these guys before. He's played against El Tri before in qualifying. So that experience is going to be hard to kind of pass up. Only question is, the John Brooks, Omar Gonzalez, is that a tandem that's well suited to work together? And that's kind of the question mark. Yeah, because neither one of them is a speedster. You kind of wonder how they'll play together.
Well, it's good giving us a little insight. I mean, you guys, the reason why I don't cover the United States, and I players that I haven't even heard of that maybe I should be paying a little more attention of. But thank you, Ives. Let's go to Mr. Tom Marshall, who's already there in Columbus. Tom, like you said, all Mexican journalists finally are getting there. You start seeing the USA. Tell us what's going on, at least the atmosphere. There were 30 fans in the airport supposedly waiting for Mexico coming in. I know you had a chance to try to go there. The players kind of went through the back gate, didn't really talk to anybody. But give us a little bit about the atmosphere. One of the most important questions is the weather. Every time we're talking about the Columbus games, if you talk to Rafa, if you talk to Osvaldo Sanchez, if you talk to almost any player, they always say the weather is brutal there, which it's no Denver, right, against Costa Rica. I mean, that was brutal. So what's going on in Columbus, Tom?
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's cold outside, but it's nothing. I don't think it's going to be a factor in the game. It's not like freezing. It's not going to be, I'm sure once the players get warmed up, it's not going to be an issue. But yeah, like Ives was saying, I mean, you can just feel the excitement building up now, and obviously the Mexico fans at the airport. Talking to them about the ticket situations. I feel like a lot of Mexico fans on Twitter and talking to the guys at the airport, they don't like the lottery system. They feel it excludes them. I don't know if they've got any evidence about how it does, but I mean there's definitely a perception. And I spoke to some that have paid $300, $400 for a ticket for this game. So that's what it means to Mexico fans, and obviously there's just an absolute desperation to end this, 2-0, to get a result. And at the end of the day, there's no reason why Mexico shouldn't get a result, or can't get a result. US obviously, it's a strong team. There's no doubt about it. It's gonna be a really good game. I don't think there's much between both the squads. They're both one of the good things. Well, apart from Cameron and Dempsey, and I think that if you look at both sides, there's not too many injuries so far. So it's like we're going to see what is legitimately the best side from each. So yeah, I mean it's just excitement building up to Friday.
Lots and lots of excitement building up into Friday, just like Tom's saying. It looks like we've been seeing it kind of get heat up on Twitter too, right? The U.S. Going with the 2-0 scoreline. Ives, it's something that we want to ask. And as a Mexican, supporter, as someone that's been following the game, the 2-0, as much as anyone wants to say, it does kind of irk a little bit. It kind of just stings that, that chant. You're coming in. You've talked to some players. You've known the U.S. soccer. How important is keeping that alive? From seeing that, 4 years ago, Dempsey, 90, 80 something minute, ready to take a PK. Do you have an inside knowledge? Of course, I don't think he'll ever admit it, but that 2-0 is something that it's kept, and it's kind of like cultish. Keep going, even leaving I could even say that goal kind of helped even Mexico get to the World Cup, because on goal differentials against Panama, they were able to beat Panama and was able to get to that game against New Zealand. If Dempsey could have scored that, I think Mexico couldn't have gone. It would have gone and stayed home, and Panama would have gotten a chance to get to that repechaje. So talk a little bit about that 2-0, what you see in the camp and how important that is to the United States. Or are we just making a big deal out of it?
I mean, honestly, I think the 2-0 means a lot more to the fans than it does to the players. I mean, I think the players enjoy the fact that they have that kind of that tradition, but I think that scoreline means a lot more to the fans because they can just have those bragging rights. And it is interesting how often that scoreline pops up. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's uncanny, really. I mean, how many times? I mean, I remember that I wasn't at the very first one in 01, but I was at the one in I remember being in Arizona, 2-0, and obviously all the ones in Columbus. But you know what? If the U.S. if they win 2-1, I don't think they're going to be upset, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, they want to win this game. And I will say one thing about the weather. You're talking about the weather. I've been checking on the weather since last week, trying to see what was up, and it seemed like it was going to be mild and warm. But I'm looking now, and it's going to be a low of 32 on Friday, which is kind of a little chilly. It's not right. Look, it's not Antarctica, but 32 degrees. You know what I mean? If you're not used to playing in the cold weather, maybe.
That's technically 1 degree away from freezing temperature.
We looked at the weather. Believe me, we saw this. It looks like around 7 p.m. it's like 50 degrees. All right, it's a 32 but in the early morning. But hey,
what's
still
it called?
cold.
Right now with the hexagonal start. I mean, it happened also in the 2010 World Cup qualifiers. The debut was the U.S. versus Mexico, but it was in February.
Right.
Now it's in November. I think that's a big difference there. And then the situations are quite interesting because in 2009 there was Sven-Goran Eriksson, the coach, and now it's Juan Carlos Osorio. Of course, here Juan Carlos Osorio has advantage of the language. There's no language barrier, so like Eriksson had at that moment in 2009. But Ives, the question right now is with Bradley and Altidore and how they're playing with Toronto. and the great form that Toronto has been showing in the MLS playoffs, how does that influence in the U.S. men's national team, having those two players in phenomenal form at the moment?
Well, I mean, you can't state strongly enough how important both those guys are to the U.S. And the thing with Josie Altidore, when he's healthy, he's been so important to the U.S. and so effective for the U.S. You can really run the attack through him. He has great hold-up play. He can also, beat defenders up one-on-one and score goals. The big issue with him is injuries, especially around competitions. That's been the toughest problem for him. But, I mean, that was a terror. As far as Michael Bradley, for me, he's the most important player on the team, just in terms of tactically how important he is to kind of locking things down. And what I think, maybe Mexico fans might not realize is that Michael Bradley's really kind of evolved in recent years. Now he's kind of moved back in the midfield. Now he's really focused on solidifying the defensive side of his game and really becoming kind of evolving into a pure number 6. Whereas in the past, he was more of a box-to-box player. As Mexico fans know, they remember the goals that he has scored and the two goals he scored in qualifying last time around. So I don't think he'll have as much of an influence in the attack, but I think he could have even more of an overall influence by most likely sitting deeper and kind of organizing things and building from deeper in midfield and also supporting the defense. That's what he's done in Toronto, and that's been a real big key to Toronto taking that next step this year, is his kind of evolution as the number 6.
Well, before we go into kind of a little more formations and what we could expect, and also since we have Ives here, someone that has known Osorio and his stint through the MLS, and we had him on the show when Osorio was first hired. Just kind of a little bit about the game. This is a very different game. Did you guys think, especially the situations that are coming in? 4 years ago, Mexico playing in Columbus was an interim coach. I think Dena was coaching then. There was already problems. Chepo de la Torre was just fired. It was a different atmosphere. It looks like they didn't have a game plan through some problems there, the pressure that Mexico had. It looks like it's a little bit, at least on the pressure side. Yes, Mexico was just got done with the 7-0 here in the Copa Centenario, the 2 friendlies that they just had, but the pressure at least is dwindling, not coming in. Naive, since you kind of brought it up, the difference between other games has been Goran Eriksson. I could say maybe the La Volpe game, it was a straight out. I mean, Mexico had a great team then, and the U.S. took another 2-0, and we can't even talk about 2001. But the last 2 matches between these 2 in Columbus is a little different for Mexico. And it looked like, I mean, I even remember Mexico, there was no way with the way coming in and the way Columbus is. And I also think the U.S. had a really top quality team, especially in 2009. That team, as I remember, it was Donovan. You had all those key figures that had always been a staple of the United States versus Mexico. But Naive, this game's a little different. Osorio bringing in his arsenal, the U.S., and I as we've seen also the U.S. not coming in as confident as we saw the last round, the qualifying, where losing against Guatemala, not having the best results, a little lift obviously in the Copa Centenario, but this game's a little different between both of the sides. Do you see a little bit, at least an advantage psychologically, at least for Mexico coming in, since it's the first game of the Hex, or completely different? They should win this game, or it's going to turn around and be the same thing that happened 4 years ago?
No, I think it's a start for both teams. And then when you look at what happened in the summer, I mean, the U.S. had a Final Four finish. Mexico didn't. I mean, I think that psychologically does put the U.S. in a position of sort of perceiving some ideas that perhaps before the Copa Centenario there weren't there. I think the addition of Pulisic in the U.S. brings a spark that perhaps it didn't have before. It does represent a sort of a new Donovan in a way. But with Mexico, it's this uncertainty as to what lineup we're going to see. What type of Mexico are we going to see? Are we going to see the Mexico that we saw against Jamaica in the Copa Centenario, or are we going to see the one we saw in the first half against Uruguay? I mean, I think having that idea as concise as possible, and the 11, a good, the block. I mean, we can say that Moreno, Layun, Chicharito are probably going to be in the 11, Talavera, for example, Rafa Marquez again. But we still don't have a concise idea of what type of Mexico we're going to see. And I think that's where perhaps the U.S. does have an advantage, because we're still seeing this development in Mexico.
I think the only thing that seems like we can almost somewhat confirm, and we saw that recently with our predicted starting 11s, is that we assume that Mexico is going to have a back line of 3 defenders. And that's under the assumption that the U.S. men's national team is going to start with 2 strikers. And I think that's something to keep in mind. That's actually really quickly, one more quick question for you, Ivis, is what do you think is the likelihood of the U.S. men's national team to start with 2 strikers up top against Mexico this Friday?
I think it's a good chance because the tandem of Josie Altidore and Bobby Wood has looked really good together. They play well off of each other. Bobby Wood does a ton of work defensively, but also his runs to create space for other teammates. Coming off of that Trinidad Tobago match, Stephen Hart had really high praise for Wood and the work that he did. I think it'd be tough to leave him on the bench. I know he's recently been serving a suspension for what was a pretty soft elbow in the Bundesliga, but I think he's a player. Bobby Wood's a player who steps up in big moments, and he's pretty fearless. And I mean, I think those who remember the CONCACAF Cup, Bobby Wood coming on and scoring that goal. Yeah. I mean, he does it. He does it on a big stage, and it's crazy to think how far he's come in 2 years, from on the bench in a Bundesliga 2 team to starting in the Bundesliga and now starting in the U.S. team. It'd be pretty tough for Klinsmann to leave him on the bench. And also because if you look at the midfield options that Klinsmann has, I don't know if he has the midfield options to go out and try to play a 4-5-1, any kind of 4-2-3-1 variation. And I also think Bobby Wood is better than the wing options he could put out there for any kind of other variations.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something you said we saw about the pressure. I disagree about Mexico, that this is different. I think the knives are out for Osorio. Mm-hmm. You know, I think the Mexican media, they're after him. You know, they've not grasped what he's trying to achieve with the national team. And that 7-0 it's just hanging on. That, you know, the big, this is aside from the rivalry, this is the thing going into Friday's game. Can Mexico react? Forget the September games where Mexico were already qualified. Forget the October games, which was a B team and young. This is the first real game Mexico's since that 7-0 defeat. It's going to the most difficult place to go for Mexico in the whole CONCACAF region. And we're going to see what kind of reaction this Mexico team is going to give, what kind of reaction the players, the individual players. Osorio is adamant that these players 100% back him. They buy into what he's trying to do. You know, I've not seen it from the fans. I've not seen it from the majority of the media. But he's saying the players back me. Okay, Friday is the time to show it. You know what I mean? It's the opportunity.
Well, I guess that's what I was saying, where I guess in a team-wise, I know obviously the pressure from the media and from everyone, they have to win this game. But at the same time, at least the players, the coaches, there hasn't been a coaching change like we've seen in the last 2 games in Columbus, where it was disaster, and knew that there was going to be problems already going in the way that they were going to play against the U.S. And that's what I meant by the pressure, at least in the players, of getting that result. I don't see it as much, or at least internal problems that I saw coming in. Osorio, it looks like he's got a plan. And not that saying that I'm hanging all my hopes on Osorio, because we've been down that road before. But at the same time, yes, if they lose this game, I don't believe it's the end of the world. I don't believe that if Mexico loses this game, it's over.
I think the Mexico press will be jumping on his back.
Of course they're going to jump on it.
Crazy.
Well, you guys, if I can chime in, I mean, I can tell you right now that Osorio feels that pressure, and it's not just about the fans either. I mean, I think he understands what he's dealing with. You know, I've had a chance to chat with him about all this stuff, and the interesting thing is in October, when they have a couple of friendlies against some pretty weak competition, he wanted to take a look at some younger players. It wasn't all about this November game. And then he got ripped to shreds because he didn't call in a full strength team for some pretty meaningless friendlies. And it wasn't, and I don't think it was just fans and media too. I mean, I wonder on the higher levels if there were some questions about why didn't he call his first team, and something that he kind of intimated to me is that, you know what, he has the responsibility to the program as a whole, looking long term as well, which is why he called in some newer faces and why it wasn't all about just November. So I think he feels the pressure, but you know what? He's faced pressure before. Down in South America, obviously, and I'm sure that the job in Brazil at Sao Paulo was a really good test for him to kind of let him know what real pressure is, because everyone knows being a manager in Brazil is about the least job security that you can have outside of El Chico. But you know, he feels that pressure, but I don't think it's going to get in the way. But I do think it's interesting how a coach who has one loss, what is his record's what, 12-1-2?
Yeah.
And sometimes you hear the analysis and the criticisms of him. You think he'd lost 5-6 games. It's pretty crazy.
I think another thing.
There's a
He
great
lost
quote
5-6 games in the score. He lost 5-6 games in the score. Like if he lost 5 games, he would have lost 7-0. He just did that all in one game, and that's where it was. Go ahead, Tom.
There's a great quote by Osorio in an interview, and he said, you know, the pressure in Mexico is the same as like being the Brazilian national team manager, with the difference being that Brazil have won 5 World Cups. The expectation is the same in Mexico as it is in Brazil, but they've got the history, and he's trying to forge this competition. He's trying to forge like depth in the squad, and to be fair to him, with this squad that he's picked, I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's not stupid. He knows this is a massive game against the States, and he's Vela there. He's got Giovanni there. He's, you know, if you want option off the bench for this game, then they're there. Quick point though, you know, about the same thing about the pressure. I think if Mexico go behind in this game, it's just such a massive question mark for Rio do tactically, because I think he put part of the blame for that 7-0 on himself, because he didn't have a plan B. You know, he didn't just shut up the whole game and just lose 3-0. You know, he kept going with this attacking and pressing and leaving it so open for Chile to exploit the gaps. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think it's going to be fascinating. I think Osorio, if he was to be really honest, he'd absolutely love the freedom that Klinsmann has.
Everybody would, Tom.
To kind of have this kind of, right, you've got 4 years to do stuff.
I think something to keep in mind is the fact that also, like, we talk about as if like him going up against U.S. national team, well, what will this be? Like, he still has a game against Panama 4 days later. I think that's still something to keep in mind. Like, perhaps can somewhat change what people think about him, regardless of whether he loses the U.S. national team, how he does against Panama. Like I said, just like literally the next week afterwards. It's just something that people should keep in mind, because if he has a really tough loss against U.S. men's national team, will he really be fired after that match? Will he really, with that match just around the corner? I think that's something else to keep in mind.
No, I also think that the style will really matter in the next 2 games against the U.S. and against Panama. I mean, I think you will analyze overall what happens. I mean, look at the options he has. You know, against Canada over there, where they won, you know, for the first time in a long time, Osorio did with El Tri. You know, he had Chucky Lozano and Tecatito Corona from the start. But now he has options like Vela and Giovanni and Marco Fabian. So it will be interesting to see what he decides. Will he go with the pace like that Tecatito and Chucky will offer, or will he go with the experience, quote-unquote experience, that Giovanni and Vela already have? And let's not forget, when Giovanni and Vela have played against the U.S., the performances have been quite worthwhile. So, I mean, I think that's something that Osorio will need to keep in mind, you know, and Vela just had a phenomenal game against Atletico Madrid, and I think that also is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind, Osorio, I think, is really wary of the threat that the US pose in terms of set pieces, about the aerial stuff. But how aware do you think Klinsmann is of that potentially Mexico has this weakness in terms of the? And it's very clear that Osorio believes there is a problem there, and I think he's going to set up his team. You know, he said to me, like, 6 players that are good in the air.
Yeah.
You know, which is a lot of players. I mean, it's quite reactive. You know, I know Mexico are gonna, you know, they're gonna have the technical players there, but to have to say I'm gonna play 6 players who are good in the air because the US scare me in the air. I mean, obviously, I think Cameron's a loss in that regard as well. But I mean, do you think Klinsmann's very aware of this? Like, you know, this is an area that I can attack Mexico, because historically in Columbus they seem to do well from set pieces as well.
Right. It's set pieces have obviously played a part in this series, and when you look at the matchup, it is a strength that the U.S. should try to take advantage of when you have a guy like John Brooks or Josie Altidore, and the service. Michael Bradley can provide some pretty good service on corner kicks. it could definitely play a part. I don't know if it's to a point where Osorio is necessarily going to start players who are not that good, but they're good in the air. Like, I don't think it's to that extreme. I think maybe Osorio was kind of making the point that this is something that Mexico has to be conscious of. But I tell you what, when I look at the attacking options that Osorio has, it's going to be interesting. And the point I think Naib made was about some of these players like Gio dos Santos, who have the history against the U.S. of doing well. I feel like Osorio is more likely to look at guys who are really, really in good form, and then that's why it wouldn't shock me if Marco Fabian is in the starting lineup. And I've seen projection. I don't see people projecting him as a starter, but I tell you what, me personally, I would start him. I mean, I've seen what he's done in the Bundesliga. I mean, come on, how do you not start him? And I think Osorio, I think that will mean more to him than Gio dos Santos floating a shot over to Howard 5 years ago. That's not really going to matter at all. But I think if anything, and I said this, I feel like I said this when I was on with you guys way back when he got the job. The good thing Osorio's good at, if he has options, I feel like he'll pick the right ones. Now, whether those guys deliver, that's another story. But I think he'll put the 11 out there that's best suited to get the win in this game. And with the players that they have and the form that they're in, I'd be, if I was Klinsmann, I'd be a little worried right now.
And I've seen that, what Tom's talking about, where he's adamant about having the right players, and obviously you're voicing that also too. Having players like Aquino, Jürgen Damm, Tecatito, who are not great in the air, and having other players that can help in that aspect. He did it with against Uruguay, for example, having Talavera as the keeper, switching the goalkeepers in order to make sure that it's covering those are the things that's there. But interesting to see, obviously tactics we can talk all day and we can all discuss and how it is. I kind of want to ask Tom or Naib, and even Cesar too, looking at this roster that came up, I almost feel like we've seen kind of Osorio do his own thing, and it's not coming, and he's getting a lot of media and scrutiny and all this, not calling the right players, and all of a sudden, bam, he has this call up of everyone who we want to see, kind of like saying, all right, fine, you want these players, let me call them up. Do you feel that at all, Tom, that kind of happened here? So there wasn't that much, pressure, or at least, the media kind of just thrashing him about not calling up Vela or not calling up Jonathan dos Santos. I honestly don't see, for example, Jonathan dos Santos starting or even playing in that sense, or Ochoa for that matter. Yeah. And it was kind of like, all right, fine, I'm going to make everybody happy.
No, I don't think Osorio cares in any way about other people are thinking about him. I honestly don't. I just don't think he cares about that. I think he's picked the players because he thinks this is, if he needs options, and obviously if Mexico are behind in the game, then he's got real options on the bench depending on the circumstances of the game. I just think it's as simple as that. He's had a bit of luck as well, Osorio, with this call up, because like I was saying then, Marco Fabian has just been amazing recently. I mean, man of the match performance again last weekend. And you got the likes of Giovanni dos Santos, who's just coming into the form. You've had Carlos Vela, who was man of the match against Atletico Madrid, one of the best teams in the world last weekend. Cero, he's moved to Italy and he's become a regular for Fiorentina. So he's got 3 or 4 added players there who can generally now challenge for not just a place in the squad, but to be starters. I mean, you can add to that Diego Reyes as well, who's doing well now at Espanyol. So it's come together at the right time. I think there's a lot of good, lot of positives with this squad in terms of, there's players that are in form.
All right, Ives, to you, give us some hope, even though you probably don't want to give us a hope, but at least, what are the weaknesses that the U.S. has on there? So what are you worried as a fan, and as obviously it covers somebody of the game that you're questioning Klinsmann on certain parts of his projections for the game or lineup. What, if anything, does the U.S. have a weakness right now?
Well, I think without Jeff Cameron, I think there's some real question marks about the defense, not only at center back but also right back, where you have DeAndre Yedlin, who he just a month ago, Jurgen Klinsmann was kind of getting on him for not having a good camp, and Yedlin responded to that by going back to Newcastle and playing really well, grabbing the starting job at Newcastle. So right now he's doing well, but let's not forget at Copa America, if there was a weak link in the defense, it was Yedlin. I think he was the weakest defender of the four. But so between him and maybe Omar Gonzalez or Birnbaum next to John Brooks, I mean, there's definitely places there where if you're Mexico, if you're Osorio and you have the attacking players in form that you have players you can target. So I think that's the question. Can Yedlin stand up to the challenge? Can Omar Gonzalez stand up to the challenge of an informed, Chicharito, or informed Fabian or whoever Osorio puts in his front three? And the attack is what I'm interested to see. The U.S. in Copa America, they showed a lot of confidence, but they had Clint Dempsey. Clint Dempsey was a big part of their success in the attack in Copa America, and they're not going to have him there. And that creativity is not easy to replace. And I know Sasha Kljestan has come in and kind of, looks like he's going to be a starter, but I don't know if he's going to be a starter, because now that Jermaine Jones is back and with what he brings to the table, if Klinsmann sees him this week and feels that he can give him 90 minutes, I think we're going to see Jermaine Jones start, just because the toughness, the attitude, the big game swagger that Jermaine Jones has. I think you have to put him in. I think you put a Jones in next to Michael Bradley. And let them work the middle. And Sasha Kljestan did not have a good playoff series for the Red Bulls in these last couple of weeks. So that's a real question for me, because if it is Jermaine Jones, then you have Jermaine Jones and Michael Bradley in the middle. All of a sudden, you're really struggling a little for creativity because you don't have Dempsey. Now you're relying on Christian Pulisic or Alejandro Bedoya, who he doesn't give you a ton in the attack. So that's where the questions can start to arise, and that's where. If you're the U.S., you almost kind of need a Christian Pulisic, even though he's only 18. You're going to need him to play a big role in this game. And I know that sounds crazy to say for a kid who's only 18, but anyone who's seen him in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League the last couple of months, I think he's up for the challenge. I think he's a kid who has no fear. He's blossomed in that Dortmund system, and I think he's someone who could really have a big game. I think in this match on Friday.
Yeah, no, definitely. Nice. It's interesting. It was interesting to Klinsmann as well. When he did his Facebook Live, he mentioned that he was thinking about playing Jeff Cameron as a defensive midfielder, which I thought was fascinating. I think it gives a little insight into Klinsmann mindset, and I think it fits into the same kind of theory about Jermaine Jones. I think if he can play, he'll be in there. If he's fit enough. But Cesar, from the Mexican point of view, we're talking about there about creation and stuff. Mm-hmm. It feels like Carlos Vela has been in debt. He's got a lot to prove to the Mexican fan base. All of a sudden, he's come back in after a year out. He's had such a rocky relationship with Mexico fans, with the Mexico national team. And then it was weird. I know you were watching the game last weekend, but then Vela comes out with that performance. My God, that's what he can do, And Ives was saying then about Pulisic. But you look at it from the Mexican point of view. How tempted do you think Osorio will be to say, you know what, put Vela in? He has to be. I don't know. He has to want to prove himself.
Vela as a super sub.
Yeah, I think that's the tough question. I think on a lot of options, I think especially in a winger position, Osorio has a lot to consider, because let's name the wingers right now that Mexico has. You have a Tecatito. You have a Jürgen Damm, because Javier Aquino is now injured, not a part of the call-up anymore. You have an Irving Lozano. You have a Carlos Vela. Now there are options for Osorio to choose, and although Vela is the guy who is arguably perhaps even the most talented Mexican player out there at his very best, when he decides to be at his very best, yes, I think he impresses me a huge amount. But it's only been a short amount of time in La Liga. What he has, if I remember correctly, that's 4 goals in his last 7 league matches. That's impressive. And what we saw against Atletico Madrid was almost like a Vela from 2013, from 2014. I even say maybe like early 2014. And it's tempting to want to start him. I would still say that, I don't know. I think I would still have a little bit more faith in a Tecatito, a player with a little bit more pace, or even with Lozano. I would put Vela the same level that I would put a Gio, which is someone which would be an exciting catalyst for Mexico's attack in the second half.
The same question I asked, Ives on, the weakness. I kind of want to ask Naib, what we've seen in the last 2 friendlies, what we've seen also, before that in Copa America. We did see our defense just not clicking together. I've seen some problems in trying to get somebody in there. And then also, just talk a little bit about Rafa Marquez, someone that knows, why he was brought to this game could be for two reasons. One, either leadership that he brings. Obviously, he wasn't there with that 7-0 debacle. But at the same time, are we going to see him in the defense, which I feel is one of the weaknesses that Mexico has, at least has shown?
I think when you see the name Rafa Marquez on the list, it does sort of generate a little bit of questions considering, he was coming off an injury, not 100%. But, Osorio left out someone like Jesus Molina from the list, who's, a true defensive midfielder. So basically now you have Rafa Marquez and Diego Reyes, who can sort of play that central defensive midfield role in a way that Osorio likes. So it does make you think that, like Tom said, that Osorio told him that, he wants 6 people in the lineup that are good in the aerial game. Well, that does put Marquez as a possibility, to start, mainly because of the way that he distributes the ball, especially from the central role. But then again, he will also, I think, it will be really, really important to support him accordingly with, Guardado, Jonathan or Herrera. I think that's a question there. I think Jonathan could be of great help to someone like Rafa Marquez because, he does play in Villarreal where sometimes he's sort of pulled on the right flank, not so much in the center, but he can come and support in the center because that's his natural role for Jonathan Dos Santos. So I think the middle is going to be really important in the game, like Ives said, with Michael Bradley and Jermaine Jones. I think you want to have a really, really consolidated midfield that includes Marquez's experience, but that he does have support from someone like Jonathan and Guardado, or it can be Héctor Herrera, who's one of Osorio's favorite players without a doubt. So I think there's options there.
Really quickly on the midfield, I think that's when I was choosing my starting 11 for the Mexican national team, that was one of my biggest problems. Also defense, that was something a little difficult for me to figure out who'd be working alongside Moreno, and I deemed Salcedo to be a starting option in the back line. But it's figuring out, just because there's so many options in that midfield. And I personally, I don't see Rafa in there. I see more so I like a Layun, Guardado, and Jonah, but that's something to consider what Osorio would choose right there. And then, especially when you need to shut down someone like a Michael Bradley, which is a key player that will obviously be seeing someone who could potentially have a significant presence in Friday night's match. But that's something that's difficult for me to try to figure out what Osorio will be doing on Friday with his midfield options.
Well, hey guys, maybe you could answer this question for me. Who do you see playing in the middle of that defense for Mexico? Because I think that's going to be a big key to this game when you have the force of a Josie Altidore, the speed of a Bobby Wood. Whoever Osorio plays in the middle of that defense, he's going to have a big job.
Yeah, I think obviously, first of all, is he going to play line of 4 or 3 centre backs? And I think it's going to be 3. Why? Because the US are playing 4-4-2, and I think Osorio's philosophy is similar to Bielsa in that he tries to have a spare man at the back. So you think it's going to be 3, or you assume it's going to be 3, and then on the left-hand side it has to be Moreno, because the other option's Oswaldo Alanis, and he's not even been playing for Chivas in the league. And then in the middle, I think it's Diego Reyes or Rafa Marquez. And I think on the right, I don't know. You've got Carlos Salcedo, you've got Ayala, who's actually playing really well for Tigres, and Nestor Araujo, a guy I think Osorio really likes. But I think they're definitely going to play those kind of 4 centre backs, if you know what I mean. So the line of 3, and then either Reyes or Marquez in the central midfield role.
I'm going with a more attack-minded idea. I think that as opposed to having someone up there like a Reyes or Marquez at defensive midfield position, I like someone like a Guardado who could perhaps as control the game as he has with PSV. In my center back options, I like the idea of a Moreno, and Araujo, and Salcedo. For me, those are 3 very strong options. I think those are, if we're looking for a strength back there, if we're looking for someone that could keep up with the Josie, but at least an aggressive presence, I like those 3 options. So I think I'm going with the Moreno, Araujo, and Salcedo, and I think I'm still not convinced by Reyes, even though he's had a decent showing in La Liga with Espanyol, and I think just right above them, I think it'll be a Guardado.
Just to chat a little bit about Araujo. I think Araujo is one of the players, he's playing for Santos, who hasn't had a brilliant, season so far in the Apertura. But I think when you speak to the guy, he's one of the most convinced players by Osorio. I mean, to the extent that he actually notes Osorio as one of the most influential coaches he's had, and he doesn't even know him for a year. But he was probably the best. One of the standouts for Mexico in the Copa America Centenario was Nestor Araujo.
One of the only standouts.
One of the only standouts. Even in the horrific.
The only standout.
But I think that's important. In the way that he sort of gets the idea. Because sometimes I feel that for certain Mexican footballers, it hasn't been easy to understand Osorio's philosophy. Araujo has actually been one of the players that has understood it right away, especially with the back line of three, that is three center backs, and the movements are so sophisticated. I remember, I think what the advantage here that you have is that you have someone like Salcedo who's playing really well in Fiorentina on the right side. He also has the MLS experience. I think that really plays a role in his possible starting, addition in this case. And then you have Moreno on the left, who is probably, the center back that has the most experience after Rafa Marquez in Europe. So I do think that Nestor Araujo is going to be that last man, and in front of him will be Rafa Marquez.
Hey guys, I just to follow up real quick, I am curious to see what Osorio does with Marquez in this game, because he has so many options, so many younger options, and looking at it big picture wise, is Marquez going to be at the World Cup, right? No. So this game is a big opportunity to give some high pressure experience to some younger guys, and that's why, I wonder what the reaction would be if he puts Marquez on the bench. And think about this: Rafa Marquez started in the 01. 2-0. That was 15 years ago.
We can say that Marquez has been, the reason why Mexico has lost against the U.S. On about 3 occasions.
I feel like I can have a separate podcast just specific to why I don't think Rafa Marquez should be in Mexico starting.
No, but here's something that I know that's a little bit internal. Rafa and Osorio get along really well.
Yeah.
From what I kind of hear. In fact, tactically wise, Rafa, it looks like he's there and discussing tactics, subs. If you're seeing the games, you're going in there.
Why not just have that presence on the bench?
No, because again,
the locker room presence and just
I tell you what, it's quite interesting. That says, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Rafa Marquez is at the World Cup, but not in a playing role.
Oh yeah, I'm still uncomfortable with that. I like that he's saving that spot for. A younger option who can have a bigger influence.
I feel that this is a game where you need leadership, and there is no one on the team. I know Guardado's there, but I think Rafa, he's been there. He's seen the pressure. He's seen where he comes in, and I know he's all 2001. He's been there forever, but it's not like there's someone that can say is a little bit better than Rafa. Maybe having in for 50, 60 minutes to see, where the game is at. But I feel that, Osorio and Rafa, and he's going to be there, and
but I
leadership, which was missing against Chile.
Yeah, I do have to point out though that what Ives says about making a statement of moving away from this Rafa Marquez presence and because you do have the possibility. For example, you can put Jonathan Dos Santos in that role that theoretically Rafa Marquez is going to play, because that is his natural role. But that will take away that idea that you want 6 players that are good in the aerial game, how intense is that?
Yeah, I just don't think Osorio is going to do. He's going to play Jonathan Dos Santos, so he's never called up Gallito. And if you look back at every team sheet that Osorio's put out, he's never put one of those small kind of dynamic players in there, in that central defensive midfield role. He's just never done it. And going back to Ives' question, basically, you look at the squad, Ives, and there isn't anybody else. There's Diego Reyes. It's Diego Reyes or it's Rafa Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
The more worry. And the other thing, going a bit deeper, is that there is nobody else in Mexican football to replace Rafa. Maybe we could mention Cesar Montes.
Nowhere else in world football, Tom, to replace.
I think that's the big problem. Is that Mexico needs to move past it. I think we know that it's going to be a very, 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 very long time before now that Rafa Marquez shows up in Mexican soccer. But I just don't like the idea that we're going to be potentially, I don't know,
we can still use
around Rafa heading towards the next World Cup.
I get it. But he's still doing okay. Who scored against Uruguay? Rafa Marquez did. Like that's what I'm saying. If it was a Rafa that was like not going against, he was in Canada, he was playing. Like if it was a Rafa that still couldn't bring anything, like Cuauhtemoc, 2 years ago. That all right, you're bringing him up for leadership, and he's hurting you. But it's not like there's anyone better, just like Tom says. And again, the guy in clutch moments can either kill us or be the savior of the game. And he's scored a World Cup, and he's been there against Uruguay.
I don't like that.
We can't deny though that there is a deep enough squad to sort of fill his absence. I mean, I think, for example, if Héctor Herrera was at a phenomenal level right now, because he's not, unfortunately, I think that's a problem here. We know his potential, but if we've had, with Herrera, Guardado, Jonathan, I think that could cover the midfield. And Marco Fabian, that's 4 good midfielders there.
I just think it's a weak midfield defensively.
And I also think the leadership aspect he brings is a ton. I honestly believe.
I don't like the whole leadership. Like, what is it? Guardado is just, what is it? I think he's just a few games behind Rafa.
He's a little prince. He's a little prince. He's not a. Go ahead, Ivis.
I'm gonna go on a limb, and Cesar did not pay me to say this, but if the U.S. scores first in this game, I'm calling it now.
Red card, Rafa.
It will be Rafa Marquez with the error that cost them the first goal.
There we go. I just don't think. I'm a little worried about his pace as well.
Well, that's it. Listen, Christian Pulisic, Bobby Wood, very fast, and I can tell you right now, they're gonna be looking for Rafa Marquez. Christian Pulisic, and before I forget to mention this, look, Christian Pulisic's played a lot on the left, but he can play in the middle. He can play on the right. He can float. If I'm Jurgen Klinsmann, I'm telling Pulisic, listen, go wherever you need to go. You don't have to stay on the left wing. You can go on the right wing. Yeah. I could see him and Bedoya flip-flopping. I could see him attacking through the middle, especially if Jermaine Jones starts. I think Christian Pulisic is going to have a ton of freedom in this game, and the person he's going to be looking for, if he's in the starting lineup, is Rafa Marquez.
But that's why I think he might play Rafa ahead of the centre back, not as the centre back, which is how he was playing at Atlas. Mm-hmm. He was playing in a kind of defensive midfield role with 2 physically big Colombian centre backs behind him. So he's almost like a quarterback, where like you've got players around you, like kind of shielding him. And then you give Rafa the ball. Rafa's had more touches of the ball than any other player in the Liga MX this season. I mean, all of Atlas plays goes through him, but it's because he's had that kind of cover. He's had the cover of 2 players that their job is to protect Rafa.
Rafa Marquez is going to be there. If anything, is at least.
All I'm saying is that Guardado has done quite well in that position with PSV, and he's done quite well in that position in Champions League games. And I know he's not the defensive presence that Rafa has. I know he might not have the aerial game. He most definitely does not have the aerial game that Rafa
we have a better aerial game than Guardado, bro.
I would, or maybe the argument is different now. It's whether what we prefer and what we think Osorio will do. And I think what we think Osorio will do is obviously perhaps choose a Rafa there, but what I would prefer is someone like a Guardado, even a Jonathan Dos Santos in that position.
If anything, Rafa Marquez is going to be there just for his star power because Josie Altidore adores him. He looked up to him in Barcelona. He said so himself. And, he can distract Mr. Josie Altidore.
It's his own way of trying to get him in the lineup. Let's just
that's how it is. He said that himself. I'm so glad I'm playing against you. And Rafa, all right.
But I think the other thing, it goes back to what we were saying before about, the pressure of Mexico, and then you compare it to the States, and it's like Ivy said then, why not give him a younger player this chance and all that? I mean, it's just difficult with construction. I mean, look what happened in October, meaningless games, completely meaningless, and he's getting criticized right, left and center. You know what I mean? And it's like, imagine if he does that against the States. I mean, he's basically signing his own death warrant. I mean,
what player is there that really shouldn't be there?
For example, put Cesar Montes in there from Monterrey, 19 years old.
I think a lot of people are wanting to see Cesar Montes. I think a lot of people are wanting to see him.
I mean, it'd be a massively bold move to do that. The same with Orbelin Pineda. I mean, I'd love to see Orbelin Pineda being thrown in against that US midfield. I don't think it'd be, it's like what Ivy said about Gooch. A kid who just absolutely doesn't have any fear. Like, at every level, Orbelin Pineda, you put him, in the Clásico Nacional, he scores a golazo. You know what I mean? You put him in these big Liguilla games, he does really well. He controls the game. The move from Querétaro to Chivas is taking the responsibility of going to a genuinely big club and he's improved, and he fits
in
that kind of.
in a year, Tom. That happened in 1 year. I mean, and usually it takes Mexican footballers 5 years to reach a consistent level, you know, and that's a name we haven't mentioned that much. I mean, considering how poor Hector Herrera has been, does that mean that Orbelin Pineda could be even ahead of?
And Herrera, that's actually a good. I'm not even sure.
It's a big question.
All right.
Yeah, not even sure if Herrera's going to get the start this Friday. That's just something to put up there. I feel like he's guaranteed start for a long.
I think he'll be there.
I don't know. He made a mistake in the last game against Porto. He still looked kind of a little underwhelming this season, and I think there's a lot of midfield options that Mexico has to consider, that Osorio has to consider.
I think it's going to depend on the training this week. I think it's going to be a really intense training session this week. I think Osorio is going to take a lot from him, and that's one of the big questions. Herrera, what level is he at? You know, because like you said, then Cesar, the options are there. I mean, Orbelin Pineda, you know, he's a bit of a wild card because of his age more than anything. But then, you know, obviously you've got Marco Fabian as well, who I think could play that role.
Interesting, guys. Go ahead, Ivan.
Something else to remember. You have 2 games in 4 days. Osorio's definitely going to play, you know, 4 or 5 new starters in that second game. Just, you know, the short time and also just the way he is. So I mean, I don't think you're going to see Rafa Marquez start both those matches, and I think you're going to see all of these. The Vela, Fabian, I think you're going to see all of them get at least one start, because I mean, you need to take full advantage of that depth, and I think Panama, not to take anything away from Panama, but I think that's a perfect opportunity to give some of these guys a start.
All right, guys, getting to the end of the show. We can keep on talking and make it maybe 2-hour show, definitely, but let's go ahead and ask. I know a lot of people are asking about predictions, starting 11. We didn't get to a lot of the questions, so we'll keep answering them as we go on Twitter. But let's talk about, just really quickly, predictions. I mean, it's the best part. You know, we have Ivis on here. We would love to hear what he has to say, and all of us. I'm going to start first because everyone always takes my prediction. I'm going to go. Usually I ask you guys, and by that time I'm like, oh, that was my prediction. Then I go to another person. So I'm going to go. I'm actually going to make it a positive one for Mexico. Usually I've been the negative one, and we're going to get a tie of 0-0. That's how I see it, and nobody wants that. I would sign it right now. It's just going to be one of those games, no goals scored. That's my prediction. We saw Davis. There we go. But we'll start with we'll let Ivis go last because he's our guest, and we're all waiting to see what he's going to say. But we'll go with Mr. Cesar prediction and why. Naive, Tom, and then we'll finish it with Mr. Ivis.
It's going to be a tough match. I feel, Osorio, he recently said in the interview with Tom that he's looking to change the story. He's looking to, end that streak of the Dos a Cero. I'm going to say that Mexico walks away with not a 0-0. I at least want some goals. I'm going to say it's going to be a 1-1, which would be somewhat of a positive result for the Mexican national team, ending the Dos a Cero streak. And I'm even going to include some goals. I'm going to say that Bobby Wood's going to score, and I'm going to say that Irving Lozano scores a 1 for Mexico.
That is prediction right there. All right, Naive.
I'm gonna go with a 2-1 for Mexico. The CONCACAF Cup.
I like it.
The CONCACAF Cup final was 3-2, wasn't it? Over there in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
So I mean, 2-1. I think that the teams are really close to each other. Of course, there's no Paul Aguilar this time around, but there's a Giovanni, there's a Fabian. So I think it's a good opportunity for Mexico next Friday.
Tom,
I'm going 2-2. I think it's going to be an open game. I think the States are obviously at home. They're going to have the crowd behind them. So I think they're kind of obliged to come out and go at Mexico from the off. And I think Mexico are going to, play the normal game, which is obviously to try and attack. So I just think there's going to be a lot of spaces, and it's going to be a back and forth game and between the teams basically. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if a guy named Chicharito levels and even surpasses Borghetti.
Oh, Friday. I like it.
Before we go to Ivis, it looks like 2-2 is. I've seen that scoreline Mexico-US a lot in the last 10 years. I think at least twice. There was a Phoenix friendly, and I think both Phoenix friendlies somewhere around there, 2-2 or be there. But all right, Ivis, your prediction of this game and why? Here we go.
Well, I think I agree with the guys who say it's going to be a tightly contested game. I agree. Mexico with all that talent. The thing for me is I feel like the U.S. they play with a confidence, especially at home, that surpasses their talent. And I feel like a lot of times in this series, Mexico, their confidence level is below their talent. And the key for Osorio is to even that out, is to give them that confidence that to not get psyched out by this rivalry. And it's happened. We've seen it over and over. And I think Mexico is going to give the U.S. a ton of trouble. But I'm going to go U.S. I think the U.S. is going to win. I think that, especially if I just feel like Rafa Marquez is going to show his age in this game, and I'm going to go. And here's my prediction. I'm going 2-1 USA. Josie Altidore and Christian Pulisic. The Christian Pulisic era is in full swing. He will score a goal in this game, and his legend will only grow. USA 2-1. Now, of course, I can change my prediction by Thursday. But I'm going to go 2-1 USA.
Keep that little monito up really quick, Ivis. If you see, that's actually Naib if he grew his hair out, and Tom put together. If you the blue eyes, and I added that. So
that's a nasty thought.
Right there, Tom and Naib.
Hey, this also has better aerial game than Andres Guardado.
Well, guys, thanks a lot, Ivis. We appreciate you coming on. Always a friend of the show. We get to be with you in Columbus. I know since we first I think San Antonio. We started talking and chatting there at that. I think that was a 2-0 win by the U.S. too, or. No, I think the U.S. won also.
Scored, I remember.
Jordan Morris scored in that one.
Jordan Morris, that's right.
That wasn't settled. It was last April. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 2015, right? April 15th, I think it was. All right, Ivis, again, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, the great insight that you bring with the U.S. and all the things. Please, where can we? Some of the fans might not know where you can reach your stuff. Tell us a little bit about it. It's Soccer by Ivis. Right, and on Twitter and on online, but also goal.com, right? You write also for Goal?
Right. I'm a senior writer at goal.com. I cover the U.S., MLS, All-American Soccer, and I obviously operate SBIsoccer.com, which has been around for 10 years, and we cover the American game, the international game. So make sure you check both out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ivis, Tom, Naib, Cesar. Looks like the show went by fast. Sorry to cut everybody off. Thanks again for everyone on the chat. All of you guys that have a question, we'll keep on answering them, and obviously share the show. We'll bring a lot more coming in. As far as the coverage, Tom's there in Columbus. I'll be coming in on Wednesday night. Cesar and Naib on Twitter. I'm sure there'll be some articles beforehand. Lots and lots of coverage coming on. We'll try to have a little bit of a pre-show before the game starts, especially with the news of starting 11, and we'll bring you out all the coverage. Again, I know we ran a little late, but gracias a todo. And we'll have Mr. Ivis, our guest, close us off, saying goodbye to everybody before we leave. With the rap?
He didn't know about it, but
caught me off guard. I got no rhymes. I don't have any bars. I'm sorry, no bars.
All right, Ivis. Well, thank you very much, Naib, Tom, and Cesar. This has been another Mexican Soccer Show. Catch us every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific. Hasta la próxima.
All right.